Morning, everyone. I'd now like to call to order this meeting of the Human Resources Governance and Stakeholder Relations Committee of Waterfront Toronto. I've been advised that a quorum is present and it's appropriate to proceed. So firstly, I welcome all who are joining our meeting today, and I'd also like to remind you that the open session of today's meeting is being recorded and will be posted for the public to view. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to our committee's newest member, Councillor Joe Mihovic. Joe has been appointed by the board by the City of Toronto and will serve until the end of the current council term. And we thank him very much for his contributions to both the city and to Waterfront Toronto. And so now we will start with our land acknowledgement, which is our custom. So Waterfront Toronto acknowledges that the land upon which we're undertaking our revitalization efforts is part of the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. In addition, Waterfront Toronto acknowledges that Toronto has historically been a gathering place for many Indigenous people, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples today. So now let's move to our first motion to approve the meeting agenda. And may I please have a motion to approve the agenda for the meeting? Is there a mover and a seconder?
So moved. Seconded.
Thank you, Raul, or thank you, Paul, and Raul. And do we have any declaration of conflicts of interest? None declared. We can now move on to the business of the meeting. Thank you. So we're now on our consent agenda. And the first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the open session of June 9th, 2022. May I please have a motion to approve the June 9th, 2022 meeting open minute sessions? Is there a mover?
Happy to move.
Thank you, Raul. And seconder? Thank you, Paul. Okay, and so I think we're moving quickly along to have a discussion about our ESG with Lisa Taylor. So committee members will recall that at our last meeting, we introduced the new standing item dealing with ESG. And I'd now like to ask Lisa Taylor to speak briefly on the ESG update, which is included in our materials. Lisa?
Great. Thanks, Wendy, and good morning, everyone. As Wendy noted, this is a new report, the ESG update. It's a quarterly report. It's consistent with ESG as a core responsibility of all three of the board committee mandates. And as noted at the top of the report, ESG is embedded into the corporation's mandate. So it's been something we've always done for the last 20 plus years. And what this report does, it seeks to just integrate some of the key priorities under each of the E, the S, and the G areas of ESG. This morning, as Rose will be touching on several of the S initiatives under her report, most notably the diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy implementation, I just wanted to highlight some of our current initiatives under the E, environment, particularly with respect to the climate agenda. So Waterfront Toronto has been an environmental leader in its development projects for the past 2 decades. As a result of our green building standards and requirements, we've delivered through our development partners 19 new buildings that are built, occupied, and LEED certified on the waterfront. We recently adopted the recommendations of the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, which provides a corporate level view of climate risks and opportunities, and that is disclosed in our most recent integrated annual report. Out of this work, which we did in partnership with PricewaterhouseCoopers, were several recommendations, which we are discussing with our senior management team over the next few weeks. The biggest areas of opportunity that were identified relate to establishing a corporate level climate strategy. And this would include things like green procurement, setting a corporate net zero target for Waterfront Toronto, completing a full greenhouse gas inventory, which would include emissions on our construction projects, such as the Portland's flood protection. And that helps us to develop an action plan to a net zero target, as well as setting up an overall governance framework to support this work. And as mentioned, as we're still discussing the results and recommendations with our senior management team, This could possibly, Wendy, as we discussed earlier in the week, be a deeper dive presentation at the October board meeting. And we would have, rather than myself speak to it, we would have the experts from our organization, our sustainability team, present. But with that high-level overview, I'm happy to answer any questions the committee might have, as George would be too.
Yeah, Wendy, maybe if I can just add for 30 seconds, just a little more context. One of the things I wanted to make sure that the committee was aware of is that we took Minister Wilkinson for a tour just before our strategic session. He's very impressed with our green building standards, the new ones that were released last year. He was very impressed with the work that was being done. We took him over to see the tall or the mass timber buildings and walked him around all of the site and in that east end. He actually, we talked about the feds are supposed to come out with standards. Quite frankly, our green building standards will probably be a major foundation for their work in the future. So we should be proud of that. And our team gets invited to a number of conferences as leading on the environmental agenda. So I just wanted to make sure that people were aware that, as Lisa said, you know, we were historically known for green building agenda. I think it continues to be recognized, not just politically, but internationally as well. So I just thought you should have that context.
Thank you, George. And are there any questions, Raul?
Sure, just a comment, actually. And bear with me for just a second, Lisa. This is great work, George. This is a really good leadership. I think it's something that will grow and it will connect even more strongly with our narrative. And that's what I want to focus on for just a moment on the narrative side. As you can appreciate, ESG is just front and center on all the work that we do, particularly at the ICD. And I can say that over the last couple of years, particularly in the corporate world and public companies by and large, there's been a huge swing from, gee, we really need ESG, the business roundtable in the US, to now, you know, BlackRock being sued by 12 attorney generals in the US for a focus on ESG to the presumed detriment of shareholders. So the magic in a lot of this right now, from a credibility standpoint, is connecting ESG to corporate performance. So Lisa, I think you're doing a really good job here on tracking it, on linking it in with our governance, of having the board focus on this. But I think the real magic at the end of the day is to be able to say our corporate objectives are being attained as well. So strong performance as well as ESG. So the two are really linked. And I know you're doing that. I just want to emphasize that I think that that's the real win here. And one of the reasons I say that is there's been a huge pendulum swing on ESG over the last 6 months. We've gone from folks who are falling all over each other to make sure that they've got, you know, EDI strategies, all sorts of stuff that's coming into play. And now, as I mentioned, you've got a number of public companies that are really pushing back hard. There was an article in The Economist magazine, I think 2 or 3 issues ago, a cover article. If you haven't seen that, you may want to pull it up and even circulate it to the board, because it's a very pithy conversation about where we are on ESG, what some of the issues are, and the Economist's take on where the real wins in this ESG conversation are. At the risk of going on too long, for those ICD members on the call, you would have also seen we sent out a note yesterday to our members more broadly around the climate governance initiative through the World Economic Forum, which they're chapter 0 in Canada. The upshot is that the regulators are now going to be putting disclosure compliance, TCHD, right into a lot of the regulatory pieces as well. So what that really means is there's been a push towards ESG. Companies have struggled on what to do with it. Now they're all going to be asked to disclose. And for some, they're going to say this is wonderful. For others, this is an extraordinary regulatory burden for boards. So you're going to see that there's a real big swing here. But I think there's an opportunity at Waterfront Toronto, because we're already measuring it. It's already in kind of the planning, and we've got good corporate performance, that I think there's a real interesting platform of leadership. So George, not to tell you what to do anywhere because you're already doing it, but you know, don't be shy about touting that when you're talking about the accomplishments of Waterfront Toronto and linking them to the UN SDGs. I've been a huge fan of that for the last half a dozen years, but there are a lot of folks that say that's politics. but this is obviously way beyond that. And the very last thing I'll say, because like, as I said, there's a real front and center for me, is I have a board meeting at ICD next week. We have our board dinner, and I'm inviting a fellow named Tarek Fancy to come and speak to us over dinner. Tarek's based in Toronto. He's a former hedge fund guy in New York. He was BlackRock's ESG guy until he realized there was a whole bunch of talk with no muscle behind it. And now he's become quite a vocal critic. And you will also see in that Economist article, they referenced Tarek. So I'll let you know how that plays out, because I know Tarek. But if there's a time at a board retreat that you really want to get into the nitty gritty on ESG, I'd be happy to link him in to come in as a speaker, because I think he's going to really sort of rattle people a little bit. He's very articulate, he's very reasonable, but he's got a very strong point of view. So anyhow, listen, apologize for the length of this, but thanks for giving me a couple minutes.
No,
That's great. Wendy, can I just comment for 30
Yes, of
seconds?
course.
So I know I totally agree with you. And I think one of the things that we should be proud of is we walk the talk, right? We've demonstrated that what we've said, we've actually delivered. And I think that's a huge differentiator with us and many. So I think, we should continue on that journey. And one of the things that I would just also mention is people know what we expect, a high level of leadership and innovation on that agenda. But to your point, it doesn't put at risk the other, like the architectural innovation and other things. As we saw in the Quayside development, they're actually exceeding our requirements with outstanding architectural design. So it's not an either or, and I think we need to tell that story as well. Sorry, Wendy, go ahead.
No, that's fine. And Raul, I think this is exactly the kind of conversation we want to have. So thank you very much. And the direct link from ESG to performance is fantastic, and how we can illustrate that. And I think we do that to some extent, but there's always room for growth and to do that more. And one of the things that we talked about in a pre-meeting, which I think is important to share with the committee, is the group of us have also talked about restructuring our board meetings a bit so that we can do a deeper dive at certain, so we're not just always kind of running through, all our sort of big checklists, because there's so much to cover, and management have been very responsive to that. So I think that's great in terms of, we can do a deeper dive on ESG. We can look at some of the different pieces that are really important as we go forward. And so Joe, you also have a question for Lisa?
Yes, thank you very much. Just wanting to learn and take from here what might be helpful to the City of Toronto in its pursuit of green development standards. Would you, par chance, we have a tiered approach at the City of Toronto. How would we compare to the tiered approach that the City of Toronto has? Are we, there is a tier 1, are we ahead of tier 1, behind tier 1? Can we learn from the city? We, Waterfront Toronto, learn from the city, or can the city learn from Waterfront Toronto?
So Joe, I should just tell you, we work very closely with the city. In fact, one of the issues that was raised was developers didn't want multiple different standards, right? We wanted some consistency, so we've been working with the city. Where we, at the end of the day, we land in the same spot. The only difference is our timing is more aggressive. But the good point is that developers know it's the same benchmark. We're just expecting faster delivery by the proponents working on Waterfront.
So we're at tier 1. Our standard is tier 1 of the city.
Yeah, I think we're kind of at tier 2, but Aaron, who is actually on paternity leave right now, would be able. We can send you a note to the committee to tell you exactly where we are compared to the city.
Right. The other thing, and maybe it's my own hobby horse, is I've learned so much in the last little while around tall timber. I think I might have spoken to you about this, George.
Yeah.
And the amount of global warming that happens in the manufacture of cement, manufacture and installation, call it, of cement is unbelievable. And Ontario and BC, given the amount of forestry that we have, northern development, it just ticks so many boxes. And, in exploring and doing some research on the industry in Europe, especially in the Austria, northern Italy, by the Alps, that area, they're like at step 7 or 8. And we in Ontario are at step 1 or 2. And I do think that Waterfront Toronto can be a great catalyst. We only have one tall timber factory in all of Ontario, one. I know British Columbia is looking to, I don't know how many they have, but they're looking to have incentivize a number of new factories, I think one a year for the next several years. Whatever we do there, I think is also really, given the amount of development that's going to happen on the waterfront, and we could be a leader in that way of constructing buildings. And I think we'll look, frankly, tall timber on the waterfront almost should be a standard. It should be the way we want that look. We want that look of tall timber on the waterfront, and it really contributes to sustainable design.
Yeah, and Joe, if I can just respond to that, as you know, we have some tall timber, mass timber designs on Quayside with Quayside Impact, and that expectations there. The other thing that I've shared with the committee, and we made that decision collectively last week, we ourselves are modeling the way by moving into a mass timber building in the future. So there are a number of things we're doing to, as you said, lead not only the opportunity to demonstrate leadership in the type of buildings we want to build, but quite frankly, trying to support the industry as well.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And Lisa, thank you for all of your good work on this. And we look forward to a deeper dive as we move into one of the next board meetings as management is prepared for that. So now we would move to our human resources report. And Rose, if you can please give us an update on HR.
Absolutely, Wendy. Thank you and good morning, everyone. Charmaine, if I could ask that you turn to page 14, I'm gonna start with the HR dashboard and just give you a brief overview. And for the benefit of our newest HRGSR committee member, welcome, Joe. Just want to let you know, we first introduced our HR KPIs at our meeting last November. We've been updating them quarterly. This is our 4th presentation to this committee. And this discussion will be updating it based on Q1, April to June. So we can start in the top left quadrant, employee work-life balance. I'm not going to go through absolutely everything. Just want to highlight a couple of things. We measure this KPI by taking average vacation days taken per employee. In Q1, we saw an increase in time taken compared to last year, and more importantly, in the last quarter. This is likely due to the pandemic restrictions being lifted and people feeling that they can return to some normalcy. We hope to see these numbers increase even more so in the next quarter when we report back in November.
Rose, just a moment. I just wanted to let you know the screen is blank. I don't know if other members are.
Sure, we can see it here.
I'm sorry, Wendy.
Charmaine, can you just double check?
Rose, Rahul, looks like you can see it. Paul, you can see it.
Oh dear. Okay. Sorry. Sorry to interrupt. I guess it's my system here.
No, that's okay. It's just the KPI dashboard, Wendy, on page 14, if you want to follow along. I'll just move over to the top right quadrant, employee well-being, commitment, and motivation. And for this, we measure average sick days. Unfortunately, in the first quarter, April to June, we saw a significant increase in sick time taken compared to any other quarter over the last 2 years. Generally, sick days were trending downward since the pandemic began. However, it looks like these sick day rates have returned to pre-pandemic rates, which was 2019-20. Some of the contributing factors we found were, again, returning to normalcy, getting back to some routine post-pandemic, being exposed to potential wider range of germs. I'm not a doctor. Some of the history and readings are saying this. And of course, unfortunately, we've had some leave of absences for sick time around mental health in some of our employees, and these numbers are included in these counts. We hope again to see these numbers decrease in the next quarter. With the employee satisfaction.
Rose, can I just on that?
Sure.
Q2, Q3, we're showing very low, right? Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. If we move over to the bottom left quadrant, employee satisfaction, this is where we measure voluntary employee turnover. Although the Great Resignation still continues and is trending, we saw a slight decrease in voluntary exits compared to the same time last year, although a slight increase from the last Last quarter, we had 0 voluntary leaves. This quarter, we had 3. Overall, we're pleased to see that our ratio still is within our average by quarter, given the large turnover being experienced across the market. And finally, the bottom right quadrant, employee development. This is where we measure learning and development spending and usage. We saw a slight decrease in both average dollars spent by employee and in number of employees participating in the program compared to the last quarter. The average spent, though, when compared to Q1 of last year, we saw an increase. This also could be because of workload, distribution of workload, people getting taking vacation, some vacation time in the early spring. We will continue to promote our learning and development program and hope that the employees see that we are investing in their continued skill set improvement. I'm going to move over to give you a quick update on COVID-19 and return to the workplace. When we last met in June, all our employees had returned to the workplace 2 days a week. We started this back in May. We are still at 2 days a week. However, after Thanksgiving, we are considering moving to 5 days in the office over a 2-week period. This could be 2 days 1 week, 3 the next, or vice versa. Of course, we'll monitor COVID numbers and continue to realign as we need as school children have come back. We continue to reuse the Robin check-in system. We find that it's still great for contact tracing, and we have had some increase in COVID numbers among our staff. So although not required, we still, from a human perspective, let anybody know that was in the office that they may have come into contact with someone just to monitor their symptoms. Moving on to general HR matters, our HR team and along with our IT team has continuously been working on our HR module in the current ERP system. We advised that in early April, we launched a soft launch. We're still validating data, testing the system, and just trying to fix a few kinks that are coming out of reporting. A full rollout and training to all employees was delayed and is expected to be completed by the end of October. Again, for the benefit of our newest member, Waterfront Toronto has a very rigorous and 3-step process of our performance management process. There's healthy discussion between employees and managers. Our step 1, which is our planning process, was completed by June 30th. Step 2, our feedback process, is expected to be completed by October 31st. And I'm happy to say that this year, our senior management team have incorporated at least one DE&I objective into our annual performance goals. This will at least lead the way for our entire team to ensure the DE&I objectives are included in each employee's performance moving forward. And now I'll move over to DE&I. If you recall, back in March, M&P attended and presented a final report of our 2 to 5 year strategy. One thing I'm very proud about is that Waterfront Toronto's culture here is healthy and will continue to support work on DE&I. The DE&I strategy that was presented included 12 key recommendations, which you will find in Appendix A. They're all listed and they have estimated dates of completion. The first action that was launched was to have a confidential and anonymous workforce demographic survey. It was launched in April. The survey allowed employees to self-identify and it provide us a baseline demographic snapshot of our current workforce. We're happy to say we received a 90% participation rate. Unfortunately, we weren't able to share that data with our team over the summer months. We're planning to do so at an October town hall where we're going to share some of the factors that came out of the survey and also some of the great work that we've started working on. We are starting work on our organizational values and creating a WT affirmation statement. And an affirmation statement is really important because it's that phrase that is publicly put on our website that shows that we are committed to DE&I. The values piece, obviously, as most of you know, is the what, how, and why we should be doing what we're doing. The great thing about these 2 newest recommendations, we've created 2 work streams, all encompassing our current employees that wanted to volunteer. So it's not just a management statement. It's not just George's statement. It's an actual statement that is being created by our team members. They're sharing the ownership. It's really exciting. People have been putting up their hands saying, I want to be part of this, Rose. So we're looking forward to sharing this information with our team members and then coming back to this committee in November and sharing more information. And before I ask if there are any questions, George, did you want to touch upon the upcoming office move and the announcement we made?
Yeah, maybe Rose, if I can just comment on a few things and,
Sure.
and with that. On the employment, as Rose said, we've tried to be very responsive to the needs of our employees and yet flexible, but focused in terms of our return to work. And that's gone quite well. As Rose said, we did have some increase in some of the sick leave, some of it attributed to mental health, some of it attributed to mental health related to returning to work. But also what we're finding is we have two patterns that are occurring. We have a group of very young employees who are off on paternity leave and maternity leave. And the good news is we've been able to replace them with good people for the temporary absences. So the nice part of that is in most areas, not all areas, we are getting very high quality candidates who want to work here. So I'm not worried about us losing people, because there are people willing to come here for, quite frankly, for the mandate that we have. We also, unfortunately, also have a group that have lost parents over the last little while, and that has been very, very tough on some of our employees. So we've tried to be very accommodating with regards to their required time off to deal with that. So that also has spiked a little bit of our absence, but I feel very good about where our employees are at with regards to return to work. And I've also pointed out, even though we're expecting people back, 2.5 days a week on average, so 5 over 10-day on average. In the wintertime, we've always been very flexible and responsive. If we have a major snowstorm, I'm not asking people to come in. So, I think they appreciate the fact that we've proven to be responsive as a management team, and I think that's helped us. I think as Rose said, we'll come back with more information on the DE&I survey that after we've had a chance to share with employees, because we did indicate to them they would see it first before we share it with anybody else. And then on the HR in the office, as you know, we made that decision supported by the board on Thursday last week. We met with staff on Friday. That announcement actually went over quite well. I was very pleased with the responsiveness. The following day on Saturday, we happen to have 4 different community events. I attended all 4 with our staff, so I juggled and jumped between them. We have not, I've asked senior management if they've had any negative feedback from staff. There has been none. And the feedback I got at the 4 events that I attended on Saturday was all positive. In fact, people appreciated that we did the right thing, as they even said. Leadership's about, leading the way by doing things the right thing as opposed to just doing things right. So I think, we demonstrated that they're quite, and I think the fact that we listened to their issues and try to accommodate some of their concerns with regards to transit, transportation, and some of the other things, and that they'll be heavily involved in the design phase of the workplace, I think also helps. So, I'm very pleased with where we're at, and I think we've built a very strong relationship with our staff, both with regards to key issues like return to work and the office move. So I think, as a collective group, we've done a great job of being responsive and leading with our management team.
Thank you, Rose. And George, any questions for Rose on the HR piece? Raul?
Once again, just a quick comment, but first of all, Rose, I think the dashboard's really good. So super helpful. I'm really looking to see how this evolves, but great report. The comment is actually a little bit for George. First of all, very happy to hear that you got a good response to the office move, but I'm also thinking a little bit about the ongoing conversation that you've put on the table around talent retention, filling some of the empty spots you've got, and the lack of clarity around the extension of the mandate creates a real 3-dimensional issue for you that you're trying to work through. So just another thing that I've come across that I'm working through as well is around the recession, or that people are talking about coming, that looks like there's a strong likelihood of it. But right now there's some thinking that's emerging that says that the only way to cool inflation is to actually cool the labor market. And what they're hoping to see, or what they're expecting to see, is that almost a forced recession, but an increase in unemployment is about the only thing that's going to bring down inflation. So there's some sort of emerging thinking around that. And there's some policy people that are trying to figure out how they help the Bank of Canada kind of head in that direction, which I only put it on the table to say, I'm trying to work through it because it's quite a different place than we were 9 months ago, right? Or a year ago, where it was the struggle for talent. Boy, you know, how do you keep these people in here? How do you get them in and pay them more? And suddenly we're going to be going into another scenario where somebody else is going to put a brake on this, and there could be a little bit of a pop in unemployment. Now, I don't know if that's going to impact your workforce specifically, but I just put it on the table to say I've been talking to a number of people trying to work through similar issues, and they're seeing it quite dramatically different playing out over the next 6 months.
Yeah, Rahul, the only thing I would say, two things, is we've been hearing that for some time as well, because we've talked to a number of CEOs and other organizations, and quite frankly, you know, they shared with us that employees will have a different issue to focus on probably in the fall than they have with regards to return to work. But, you know, we're just trying to do the right thing all the way through. The benefit we also have is we're a small organization. We've, as Wendy would know, being on the board for a while, I reduced the number of staff and have left some positions vacant to give us flexibility going forward. You know, we're really hoping that we'd have this mandate sorted out so that I could fill those positions with the type of skill sets I need going forward. That it's taken longer, but we've tried to stay flexible with leaving some vacancies for a temporary period of time as well.
Thank you, Rahul. And George, or I mean Joe.
Oh, it's Joe, yeah.
I'm the Slovenian guy. He's the.
No, that's right.
We're from the same area, Joe. So
Same area.
we both have beards.
Yeah, both have beards, same hairstyle.
Yeah.
Jesus. I have 4 points. One is the dashboard. I as well want to affirm that it looks really good, especially the retention. When you look at other sectors, for example, teaching, healthcare, and you see the turnover that is happening in those sectors, to know that we are retaining staff, I think is really a positive move. So kudos on that front. Secondly, kind of wearing a hat as a city person, chair of the Board of Health, I would be interested in your COVID strategy for the fall. The prediction is that the rates will go up. And I'm sure you've been reading the same papers and announcements that we've been putting out, that there is a bivalent vaccine. And my hope is that we encourage all Waterfront staff to basically avail themselves of that. And that we also honor and encourage, if someone, well, I'll just speak for myself. I have a 99-year-old pops who lives with me. And you know what? I wear the mask a lot. And it's because I'm protecting him. And so to make sure that our staff, Waterfront Toronto staff, feel absolutely comfortable having the protections that they feel they need to protect themselves and their loved ones are really important. But getting ahead of the COVID, I know there's a real resistance, especially on the provincial front, to speak about it. So organizations are kind of left to their own devices to figure it out. It's not over, and it's even frankly gotten more complicated because now we're also entering flu season. There's also monkeypox is out there. There's a lot of, if people have children, there's a lot of unattended vaccinations for children that have not been attended to, and those would be the children of our employees as well. So well, if you need support in that and figuring that out, of course, public health staff is available for that. So I want to say that point. Another thing around work patterns and how much should folks be in the office and how much should they be out of the office. We are not alone in trying to figure that out. I know City of Toronto is trying to figure that out as well. I would be interested, maybe not today, but at some point. So you've landed on the magic number of, I think, 50%. 50% is the good ratio. How do you know that's the right number? Some people want to go back to the office more. Some people feel that it's more comfortable and they get more work done if they're at home. Everyone's asking that question. And so at some point we can even be, well, I don't know, workplace leaders saying, well, this is what our story is, and this is what we discovered, that 50% is the right number, or maybe it needs to be 60%, 3 days a week, every second day, something like that. But I think we need almost a system to evaluate it, to figure out what is the right number, and when do we encourage more staff to be in the office, because there is value there, or more staff to be in the office less because it's okay because they get more work done at home. That's on changing work patterns. And the last point I want to make on this is the inclusive workforce. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. And I would say that I would love to know the numbers. Speaking as a white guy, when I look at some of the meetings, and granted it is on video, I do wonder how white are we and how diverse are we? And we might be at a low starting point. So I'd love to see the benchmarks, the base case that we're starting with when those numbers are available, and then really aggressively understanding how we move to a different place. It's a city goal, it's a national goal, it's just the right thing to do, and it produces a more, not just inclusive, but more diverse set of folks that problem solve in a better kind of way, as all the academic research shows. So I want to support in that direction.
So maybe I'll start with that one if I can,
Yeah,
and then
please.
Rosie
And then
can
I've
jump
got-
in and I'll go through the others. So I agree. I have to tell you, Joe, when I went for my job interview here, I actually talked about how I thought we needed to do more on the diversity side, having only been exposed in board meetings to the senior management team. When I got hired and came here, I was shocked at how diverse, in terms of visible diversity, we are. We're extremely diverse here. If you get to walk around our floor, maybe, again, one of the things I'm hoping is that we get a in-person board meeting soon so that we can kind of re-engage and that people get to see some of our staff here. The one thing that I also caution, we just did our diversity. There are other diversity categories that aren't visible, whether it's a disability or a sexual preference or other. Also in reporting is trying to respect the privacy of individuals. So you need to have a big enough a number of people that you're focused on, because if it's a small cell, you can start to identify who those individuals are. So we're trying to respect that balance. And I think we recognize that over the next 4 or 5 years, we will have some senior management leave. And what we're trying to focus on is making sure we have a very diverse pool that we're looking at when our executive team starts to leave. So that's our focal point there. Rose, did you want to say anything?
Absolutely. I just want to touch on some of the points that Joe brought up. Joe, I want to give you my word that although the restrictions in the province has sort of removed a bunch of mandates and restrictions, here at Waterfront, I have to say that the senior team's been responsible, taking the recommendation of our Joint Health and Safety Committee. There is hesitation, temperation, whatever the right word may be, amongst some of our staff of removing those. So we still encourage staff, if they want to wear masks in the office, they're more than welcome to. There is no concern about being looked upon badly. I'm happy to say that we are still mandating a double vaccination policy. First of all our staff is double vaccinated. That's what we're considered fully vaccinated. I'm still keeping that up with any new employees coming on board, even though we don't have to. We acknowledge that the fall book may bring the numbers up. And as far as boosters, there's quite a few of us that have gotten the additional 2 boosters. What we can't do yet is mandate that, unfortunately. Sure, we can, share the feedback and encourage everyone, and we do, but we can mandate it off. Absolutely. We are also cognizant of the fact that we've got a couple of staff members that have real health issues, a lung transplant, what have you. And we've been very, supportive in having them work from home because we want to cut down any germs and issues they have. So from a health perspective, we totally support Toronto Health. We want to be able to support our team members with whatever we can do. And trust me when I say we're encouraging everyone to still do what they have to do to keep the numbers down. On the diversity side, absolutely, we've used our best practices. We actually asked 7 great data collection, and we definitely will share all the information and baseline our picture of what our current staff looks like. But to George's point, there's really great representation with below the senior team. And with respect to some of the stuff that even Rahul said with respect to the current workforce, we received 462 resumes for a posted position. People still want to come to Waterfront Toronto. And Rahul, you're right, the market was hot. We need to cool it down in some way or form, but people are still interested. So I'm happy that that's happening. And we're still using sort of that double vaccination as a criteria to screen when we come in. And we've noticed that the candidates we speak to, there aren't any issues. So I'm happy. So I just want to let everyone know we're supporting everything we can do to keep the numbers down from an employer perspective.
So the only other thing, just real quick, as I see Paul has his hand up. So just to address the other things, as Rose has said, we have a health and safety committee. We actually work to follow public health guidelines and use that information. You know, we try to balance. We were, you know, very strict on the vaccination policy, but we were also one of the first ones back to work. But we were flexible, all right? And to your point, Joe, one of the things that we're going to have to look at, there is no formula for how many days a week. We're all going to learn as we go through. I've let staff know we're coming in 2.5 days on average. That's going to fluctuate, right? In the future, as we start to understand better how effective we are. We're busy. There's no question how effective we are in certain categories, like building new relationships. Plus, we have a unique situation here in Waterfront. We actually, our mandate is to revitalize the waterfront, and that means trying to help the retailers here. So if we're not coming to work, you know, we're not helping retailers survive. So we're trying to actually recognize not only do we have work to do in terms of our more focused mandate, but we also have a social responsibility to help revitalize the waterfront retail.
And the TTC, quite frankly,
Yeah.
You know, their numbers, if people are only coming in once or twice a week, their revenue is going down as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I think, Paul, we'll take one final question, then we'll move on to our next item.
I just wanted to support Joe in his comments on diversity. I have to say the leadership team doesn't come across as diverse. As a matter of fact, I've had people take shots at me about it. And I think the legitimate points, and it needs to be addressed.
Yes.
Right. I do believe there is merit behind what Joe said. I think the answers were great given by Rose and George, but I think this should be standing item until we figure out a solution for it and we could come to an agreement on it, right? And I fully understand how diversity could be, you know, it may not be visible. I get it, right? I do understand that and I appreciate that, but I think we need to work on the visibility a bit.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all, Paul. As I said, I raised that when I did the interviews.
No, I know, I get you. I know.
No, I fully agree, and even gender diversity on the board of directors was a top strategic priority from my perspective. So I think this is a really good, and we've moved forward as soon as we could on that one, right, George?
Yeah, we made it clear what our priorities were. Yeah.
Yes, I was
Thank you,
thrilled to have the
everyone.
new women board members join us. So this is, I think this is really a strategic priority and very, very important, and fully support that. So do we have any other questions for Rose, or can we move on to the next item? Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
And thank you, Rose, very, very good work. So each year at this time, we provide a meeting schedule for each of our directors and setting out the proposed meeting dates for each committee and the board. And the schedule for 2023 has been prepared by management. It's consistent with past years, and will be presented to the board at our meeting in October. So I'd now like to ask Ian Ness to speak briefly to these materials. Ian?
Thanks very much, Wendy. Just very briefly, the committee calendar and work plan in front of you and board, sorry, is consistent with past years. We've made a couple tweaks recognizing different schedules. For example, the March board meeting has been advanced a few days to allow Steve to participate before his term as chair ends. We've also had a couple comments come in over the last week from committee chairs to whom this was circulated, saying this may not work. But so this is I'll say it's consistent with past years, but I recognize as in past years, we'll have to tweak it as we send it out to the entire board, and we'll do that this fall, make sure that all the appointments are in the calendar. This is really just so people can do their planning for the next, well, basically the next 12 months. Beyond that, this is for information only at this point. And as I say, it'll be presented to the board. So if there's any comments or questions, happy to receive them. But at this point, it's just for information.
Thank you, Ian. Any questions for Ian? Okay, so let's move on to the next item, and that would be the work plan for our committee. So as the committee members know, it's also part of our mandate to establish each year work plan, and your materials contain a proposed work plan for next year. So I'd ask Ian Ness to speak to this matter. Ian?
Excuse me. Thank you very much. And firstly, George mentioned earlier in the meeting that we've been very successful bringing in people to help us out with some of the absences for parental leave and otherwise. And I'm happy that joining us today is Samir Akhtar. I don't know whether more longstanding members of the board will remember Samir, who was here. He's joined us on a temporary basis to help fill in when Catherine is away. And as I say, he's here today, but in particular, he also helped us put together this work plan. So what we've tried to do is create a not specific agenda items for the next year, but just to make sure that as a touch point, that we have identified the key obligations, key terms of the mandate of the committee. It will be fluid as need requires. There may be some areas where we sometimes we talk about, obviously more things that are on the work plan. And sometimes maybe it'll be postponed because of demands of one type or another. But we just wanted to make sure that we've touched on the things that were in the mandate, and that we can use it as a point of reference as we go through the year to make sure we are fulfilling our obligations as a committee. This is a matter for approval, and I would certainly welcome any questions, comments, etc.
So Ian, if I can, and Wendy, just two more comments. One is obviously one of the things I talked to Wendy about was, reflecting on our discussions at the committee, that, there are clearly a couple priorities that we would want to do deeper dives in future, so that we're just not doing flybys on all the issues, and we're actually having a little bit of time in these meetings to focus. I mean, two of the ones that came out in the last meeting and this meeting is obviously more reflection on our diversity and inclusion, equity and inclusion discussion. And obviously looking at, our skill set for the future and our hiring and retention. But, I think, again, one of the things I'd like us to look at for the committee with support of the chair of the committee is breaking out time in future meetings. So that we have time to actually go deeper into some of the more priority items. So.
Thank you, Ian and George. Raul, you have a question?
Sure, short comment. All looks good. Just a friendly suggestion where we've got the work plan for next year. So in items 1 and 5, I think it's number 3 in each one. I'm wondering if it would help us to also do an evaluation of our own performance for the past year. And I mean from the committee's perspective. And I can link that to George's comment too, that if we can set some priorities at the beginning of the year, we can actually, let's track how much time we're actually spending on those. Because if we find out that we're spending, 80% of our time on administrative and compliance matters, it's good to know, because that's probably not what we want. But if we don't track it, we're not going to know where we are. But I think the performance piece linked into the work plan for the next year would be a good moment for us to pause and see what we accomplished, and if we did what we wanted to do.
I support that. Just from a management perspective, that would be great.
Very good. Any other questions? Okay, and that would be terrific. I think we'll follow up in and Raul with that and talk about some of the metrics so that we establish the strategic priorities and measure against it. Be very, very helpful. Thank you. So
I'll move approval of the as written there. Approve the work plan of the HRGSR committee as presented.
Joe, will you accept my friendly amendment to include a performance evaluation?
Including a performance evaluation.
performance evaluation. Very
Rahul, can I, sorry, Wendy, can I just jump in for a second? Rahul, would you see, I think you sort of tied it into the establishing the work plan. We do have in the March meeting a board effectiveness item. Would you see that would be an appropriate time to talk about board effectiveness and committee effectiveness, or do you want it as a separate item like in September of each? I just want to make sure I slot in where you see it best fitting.
Yeah, good question. So I would separate the two in the sense that the board effectiveness conversation is one.
Yep.
As it relates to our committee, I'm thinking, just looking at this, that perhaps the time to have that conversation would be when we're thinking about the work plan for next year.
Okay.
And I'm thinking at some point we might want to work through ours and then share it with the other committees as well. It's not meant to be really burdensome, but it's just an opportunity at the beginning of the year to say, okay, let's look at last year. Did we kind of spend too much time on some things and miss some things? What do we want to do next year? And at least just put it out there, and at the end of the year, come back and check and see. So a part of my answer is separate the two. The other ones, I kind of leave it to you maybe to figure out where it fits in best in the timing. The initial reaction was when we're looking at next year's work plan, but I could be off on that too.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm happy to do that. I just wasn't sure if you wanted to wait another 12 months because, the next time we look at the work plan is September of 2023. So if you wanted to advance it before that, I'm happy to see if we can fit it in somewhere.
I think the other thing, Ian, is we did do a survey last time of the chairs on how effective the committees. We should share that with all of the new board members because they would not have participated in that, nor would they have heard the feedback from the board. So I think as an interim measure, if the committee agrees, we could actually share what we heard back when we did the survey last time, just so what we heard and whether we've done anything to address that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And George, I think we're probably on the same page here, but just to emphasize that what you described, really important and good to share. I'm probably taking this into a one more deeper tactical level for this specific committee. And Ian, maybe we just put this on the agenda for our next meeting and we can actually talk about, okay, as we go through this and look at our work plan, what are a couple of things that we really want to focus on? So I think George alluded to doing some deep dives and we just capture those. Yeah. And we don't need to go crazy on it this year, but let's not lose track of it and make sure by the end of the year, we come back and we just have a look and see what it looks like. And we'll figure out how we incorporate that into the next work plan.
Okay, so
Wendy, the only other thing I would say is this is really important to me because our performance plans are based on the direction the board gives us of their priorities, right? So, I share a draft of my work, my performance plan and what I put into the others with Steve in advance. He reviews it, gives me feedback. And, I want to make sure that we're focused on the right thing. So I think, having these priorities set by the committees actually helps me make sure that we're focused on the right things.
Very good. And to Raul's point, I would like to make sure that we are addressing this by this year end, even if rather than having it wait a full year. So Ian, if we can discuss how to best integrate that, it would be very good. And certainly let's have it as an agenda item for our next meeting.
Okay. Yep.
Any other questions for Ian on this piece? Oh, we need to formally do this motion.
So I think Joe has
Joe's approved it. Do we need to read it out? No. So Joe's approved it, and Raul, can you second it? Thank you very much. Okay, terrific.
All in favor, carried. Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now we are moving to item number 8, which is the governance documentation. And committee members will recall that in 2021, we concluded an in-depth review of our key governance documents with input from staff, board members, and both internal and external legal advisors. And our external legal advisors advised us at the time that our documents were up to date and reflected good corporate governance practices. But as part of the mandate of this committee, we are to consider the documentation on an annual basis and recommend any required changes to the board. And I've spoken to other committee chairs as well as representatives of senior management, and I'm not aware of any required changes. However, we'd welcome input from the committee, and over coming weeks, I intend to meet with our general counsel to review the materials. And if any other committee members wish to be part of that process, please advise me or Ian, either now or within the next week. We'll then report back to the committee at our November meeting with a view to seek approval of any changes at a subsequent board meeting. And Ian, is there anything else that you'd like to add here?
No, I think that captures what we discussed, Wendy, that we understand that there's, I think, 14 documents. Don't expect people to review them over the past week. So I think it's a process. I think it's an important process that we review annually to make sure we still reflect best practices and reflect the wishes of the committee and the board generally. So I think if there's others that wish to be involved in that process as we go through that, we would welcome their input.
Okay, very good. And so I think now, if we don't have any further questions for Ian, we can have a motion to go into the closed session to discuss items number 10, 11 of today's agenda. And I just want to remind everyone that any resolution considered in the closed session needs to be passed when the meeting returns to open session.
So I'll move that we go into closed session.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Raul. Okay, so item 13, resolution arising from the closed session. We've now returned to open session and resumed the recording of the session. May I please have a motion to approve the June 9th, 2022 committee meeting closed session meetings? Paul has moved it, and a seconder. Oh, my screen went down.
It's the resolution is on the screen.
Okay.
I think it was Rahul, but who was seconding that?
Okay, thank you very much. So having concluded the business of the meeting, I ask for a motion to, oh no, I guess I have to. So we've got, so we have Paul approving, Paul moved it, Raul seconded it. So I can move to the motion to terminate? Or do I need to do this?
Well, yeah, everybody's in favor, I'm assuming, so.
The motion itself you should vote on, but if everybody's in favor, we can just move on.
Okay, everyone in favor, thank you very much. Okay, so having concluded the business of the meeting, I ask for the motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
For a mover.
So
Thank
moved.
you, Joe. Thank you, Raul. Okay, great. Meeting
All in favor, carried.
Thank
You have to say all in favor, carried, Wendy.
Okay, all in favor, carried. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Cheers. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Yeah.
Good meeting,
Thanks
Wendy.
so much.
Cheers. Thanks for the good meeting. Yep.
And
Good meeting.
Drew
Bye.
and Jeannie,
Take care.
thank you for joining, and thank you, management. Bye.